the nicest small towns in America. There's probably like 1,000 small towns in America. So to make the list of the nicest ones, I mean, how do you even sort of qualify this? Is it based on, people's like survey results, just general sort of feeling in those towns? I'm interested to see like how he's going to sort of like calculate this.
Howdy, it's Kyle going over some cute small towns in the US. Most people live in cities or suburbs, and that's where we focus most of our attention, or we talk about getting away to national parks or state parks or other wilderness areas, but we often don't talk about some of the small towns. There are a lot of really nice small towns in the country, so this isn't going to be a countdown, the top 10 or top 25 small towns in the US, just kind of a survey of a handful of really cute small towns. And there are certainly more that I can cover in this video. I'll come back to this topic many times, but yeah, this is the first installment of cute small towns in the US.
And I think small towns, to be honest, offer like a different like way of life than living in a big city. Like people know each other. There's more of like a community, I would think.
I think New England is the part of the country that has the tightest cluster of cute small towns, so I'm going to start there, and Stockbridge, Massachusetts. It's located in the Berkshires, which is part of the Appalachian Mountain System in the far west end of the state, not too far from the New York state line.
I love this. It's like a postcard, isn't it?
The population is about 2,000, and like many small towns in New England, it's pretty old. It was established in the 1730s. In terms of visiting, it's a pretty popular day and weekend getaway for city folks from Boston or just other folks in New England. There are many art galleries located in the town, as well as the Norman Rockwell Museum. Many of his paintings were focused on the Stockbridge area. With it being an old town, there are quite a few historic inns and bed and breakfasts, pretty cool spots to stay. From an outdoor standpoint, the Appalachian Trail runs just east and south of here. Beartown State Forest is right outside of the town. So a really nice town in a beautiful setting, but just know that sometimes the turnpike I-90 there is closed from Stockbridge to Boston, but when it is, the Berkshires really seem dreamlike on account of that frosting. But yeah, Stockbridge, one of maybe 500 nice small towns.
This honestly looks like, England to a degree. Like something about these buildings and the way the shops are like downstairs. This could be like a town in England.
Massachusetts. Next, I'm going to the Midwest and Guttenberg, Iowa. This is in the northeastern corner of the state, right along the Mississippi River, in a part of the country I've discussed a lot called the Driftless area. So this includes portions of northeastern Iowa, northwestern Illinois, southwestern Wisconsin, and southeastern Minnesota. And this is a very pretty and scenic area right along the Mississippi River bluffs, and the town of Guttenberg is a really nice, cute, small town. There are about 1,800 people that live there, and it was largely built up in the 1830s by German immigrants. So there are many signs of German heritage through the years and multiple festivals that celebrate German heritage. You'll see some really nice architecture in here made out of limestone. So you have a lot of Mississippi River bluff limestone right there that's used to make some of these old homes.
I really like it when there's like brick as well as wood in a home. Like for some reason, it just, maybe because I'm used to seeing more brick buildings being from England, like it just looks more solid to me anyway.
Like all of the towns I'm going to mention in this, there's a really cute main street right downtown that has a lot of locally owned shops. And I think that's a big part of what makes a small town cute, when it's just mostly locally owned stuff without big chains. So I think Guttenberg is one of just many small towns in this driftless area that are worth a visit and makes for a nice road trip around this region for maybe a weekend. For this next one, I'm going to a twin town situation, Thomas and Davis, West Virginia. These towns are only a couple of miles apart, and that's why I'm including them together in this one, but they're both located in the far western end of the eastern panhandle of the state.
Why are they called twin states? Like, why twin states? Twin cities?
South of the southwestern end of the Maryland panhandle. So all that to say, it's a very pretty scenic area in the Appalachians. Each one of these towns has a population of about 600 people, and they're both located in Tucker County, which has about 6,600 people with a population decline. Each of these towns has a nice main street downtown. I think the one in Thomas is a little more interesting. It's a little more historic. Both of these towns have some nice locally owned shops and restaurants. There are some more outdoors oriented type shops and outfitters in Davis. And
that is an old looking building, this one right here. Looks like it's been around for like hundreds of years.
Davis, and some more art gallery type things in Thomas. And dare I say, there's even kind of a mini hippie and hipster scene in these towns. There are some art galleries, plenty of coffee shops and bakeries. And because the area is so popular for outdoors enthusiasts, there are some hangouts for people who are mountain bikers, rock climbers, and cavers. There's a ski resort nearby, and overall I would say that these are two of the nicest towns in West Virginia. These are not super well-known towns. They're not located along the main route you would use to get from the main points A to main points B. But if you do live in the DC, Baltimore area, or just in this general region, do consider a day trip to Davis and Thomas, West Virginia. They're both really cool towns. Now I'm headed to the southwest and Springdale, Utah. This is located in the southwestern portion of the state. It's the gateway town to Zion National Park, and the edge of the town is the national park entrance.
Whenever I think of Utah, there's a show here on a channel called TLC called Sister Wives. It's about this guy called Cody, and he's got like 4 like wives, and they all live in the same home. And yeah, he lives in Utah, and apparently there's a lot of similar family situations like that in Utah. Like, what is it about Utah that attracts people that live that kind of alternative lifestyle? Let me know if you've seen that show, by the way. I used to watch it quite a lot with my family. It's just very something bizarre about it that I just couldn't stop watching.
In fact, the town itself is located in Zion Canyon, so the whole canyon isn't inside the national park. The elevation of the town is 3,800 feet, and there are about 650 people that live there. Before the national park, it was just a small Mormon farming town, but after it became a national park, it became more tourist-oriented. There are some shops and art galleries, restaurants, and other services for national park visitors, and there are plenty of hotels there as well if you don't want to camp. And you can even say it's a little bougie in Springdale. If you're going to be doing the Grand Circle tour of the national parks of the Southwest, you're probably going to be going to Zion, and you're probably going to be driving right through Springdale. There's been a ton of population growth in southwestern Utah, but Springdale does remain a small town right there at the entrance of...
That backdrop is amazing. Like this mountain view that you can see here. I mean, are these mountains? I would call them mountains because they're massive and they're rocks, but... they kind of look a bit like a canyon a little bit.
Zion National Park in a really cool small town. Heading back to the northeast, I'm going to Geneva, New York. It's located at the northern end of Seneca Lake, which is one of the lakes in the Finger Lakes region. And you can see why they're called the Finger Lakes. They're relatively long but narrow. Seneca Lake is a little more than 2 miles wide. It was founded in the early 1800s, and because it's located right there on a lake with some beautiful scenery around, it was named after Geneva, Switzerland. Like pretty much all of the towns I'll mention in this video, it's a popular weekend getaway, this time for people from New York City or other areas in the Northeast. It's not just Seneca Lake, many of the other lakes in the region, but there is a Seneca Lake wine trail. This part of the state is where you have a lot of agritourism, a lot of vineyards and apple growing. And Geneva refers to itself as a lake trout capital of the world.
Oh.
So another nice small town, nice main street, some locally owned shops and restaurants. And that's again kind of the running theme here. Nice little small town with beautiful scenery around it.
Yeah, when I think of New York, most people probably, and me, just think of New York City. Like, I forget that there's a whole state called New York, and New York City is just, one of the cities there. Like, I don't really think of countryside and tiny towns and quaint, quiet ways of life. I just think of hustle and bustle and skyscrapers.
That's Geneva, New York as well. Heading over to the west coast, I'm going to Florence, Oregon. Even though it's referred to as a coastal town, it isn't really right on the coast. The water going through there is the Siuslaw River, but it's only a mile or so from the beach, so it's certainly still considered coastal. And Florence is just one of a handful of small towns along the Oregon coast. There's no big development allowed right there along the coast. All of the beaches are state parks. And Florence, being one of those small towns, has again a nice downtown right along the waterfront, some really cool restaurants and shops. There was an ice cream shop there that we went to probably every day, the 5 days that we were there. And even though it's pretty touristy, we were there in August in the middle of the high season, and it wasn't that crowded. There were certainly folks there, but it wasn't overrun with tourists. Most of the beach area outside of Florence are large sand dunes. And the beach town right next to Florence is called Heceta Beach. This is right there basically in the dunes. And just like anywhere along the Pacific coast in the summer, it's going to be a really nice escape from the heat in the interior valleys. So plenty of nice small towns along the Oregon coast, but perhaps our favorite is Florence. Now heading just an hour southeast of where I live, I'm going to Ellijay, Georgia. This is in the far north of the state. Again, about an hour.
Man, America is massive. There's just so many. Like, I've never heard of any of these places that he's mentioned so far. Like, the names of the towns. And I know that they're small towns, so that's probably a good reason that I wouldn't have heard of them. But there's just so many places in America that I've just never heard of, never seen referenced. You know, it's just completely new to me.
Hour southeast of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and a little over an hour north of Atlanta. And this is located in the southern end of the Appalachians in the Blue Ridge area, not too far from Great Smoky Mountains National Park and that type of scenery. The town itself has about 2,000 people living there. It's located in Gilmer County, which has about 32,000, and the town is located at 1,280 feet elevation. Another nice downtown with a circle there, some cool shops and restaurants. But probably the claim to fame for LJ is the apple growing capital of Georgia. From August through November, there's a lot of apple harvesting going on. There's a big apple festival in October. And we usually go down to LJ twice each year, once in August to get some of the early season apples and then once in November to get some of the late season apples. There's another town in North Georgia called Helen. That's much more popular as a tourist destination. Pretty cool downtown there as well. But LJ is a little more laid back, a little less known. And even if you aren't into the whole apple scene, there is a pretty cool town right there. Now I'm headed back to the Midwest.
Have you guys heard of these towns, by the way? Like, and if you have, if you've been to any of them, let me know if like they match up with what he's saying. Are they really cool, chilled out, nice towns, or have they like become really sort of big and gentrified? People have moved in from, you know, neighboring cities.
West and Grand Marais, Minnesota. This is on the north shore of Lake Superior in the Northwoods type area. Just outside of it is the Boundary Waters Canoe Area and Superior National Forest. And like many of these towns, it's another popular spot for artists. Located there is the Grand Marais Art Colony. There's an annual art festival there, and there's a peninsula that juts out into the water called Artist Point. It's also home to the North House Folk School, where you can learn some old-timey trades. And the town is also known for having both a summer and winter solstice festival each year. And with Grand Marais being located right there in the heart of canoe country, there are many businesses there that specialize in canoe and kayak rentals and equipment. And to go along with the art festival and solstice festivals is also a wooden boat festival. And right downtown, there's one of those old-timey five and dime type stores that predated Walmart called the Ben Franklin. And look what I found along the wall at the Grand Marais Ben Franklin. This might be the most Minnesota thing you'll ever see.
Yeah, well, like, I need to get myself a flannel, like a flannel shirt. I mean, this is a lot of flannel shirts right here. Like, I've never seen so many in one place. Like, a person watching this, do you have a flannel shirt? I suspect if you're from America, you probably do.
And if you've ever wondered where Anthony Fantano shops, well, it's the Ben Franklin in Grand Marais, Minnesota. I'm going to head back to New England for this next one, and Exeter, New Hampshire. This is located in the southeastern portion of the state along the Exeter River. Upstream of the town of Exeter, it's a freshwater river, but downstream it's more brackish. It was founded in 1638, and there's a population of about 16,000 people there now. With it being such an old town, the riverfront is the main historic area. There are many old mills there. Like many other towns in this video, there are many art galleries.
Very pretty, especially with the snow on the roofs.
There, but there's also the American Indian Museum. And Exeter is also kind of like the Roswell of the Northeast. In 1965, there was some type of UFO sighting, some kind of weird things going on. I don't know, but they do have a UFO festival to celebrate it. So think about the historic colonists showing up there on their beaten up wooden boats 400 years ago, and then a bunch of alien invaders coming 50 years ago. But yeah, that's Exeter, New Hampshire, another really cute small town in New England. Next, I'm going to what is probably the most off the beaten path place I'll mention in the video, and that's Chadron, Nebraska. This is located in the extreme northwest corner of Nebraska, which is a pretty big state. There are about 5,200 people that live there. It's located in Dawes County, which has about 8,200 people.
5,000 people. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't, is it? Like, you know, especially because the towns, I imagine, are quite large because of the space the US has. So there's not a lot of people in that town, 5,000 people. Like, the schools must be quite small as well, like nowhere near sort of the big schools that you'd find with like 1,000 students, 2,000 students.
And this is just south of the South Dakota state line. So
like, what's it like growing up in a town this size? Anyone who grew up in a town with like 5,000, 2,000 even, what's it like?
southwestern South Dakota is where you have the Black Hills and Mount Rushmore and the caves. So when most folks think of Nebraska, they're probably not thinking about that type of badland scenery, but you do get plenty of it in the northwest corner of Nebraska. And you think about how huge Nebraska is, under 2 million people, but about 1.5 million live in the southeastern corner of the state.
Wow.
That's where Omaha and Lincoln are, but again, Shadron is the far northwestern corner. So
the rest is like just basically empty.
About as far as you can get from the main population centers in the state. But it isn't just the pretty scenery. I do think the town of Shadron itself is a pretty nice small town. There is a college there, Shadron State College, but I certainly wouldn't call this a college town. But it does have a nice, cute Main Street downtown, a good barbecue joint. And you gotta love a town that chose this image to be the one you see when you go to the city webpage. So if you're visiting the Black Hills, Mount Rushmore area in South Dakota, do consider a trip down across the Nebraska state line down to Shadron. I'm heading back to the Appalachian region for this one, and Abingdon, Virginia. This is in the far southwestern corner of the state, not too far from Bristol, which is right on the state line with Tennessee. This is another old historic town. It was incorporated in 1778, and today there's a population of 8,400. And just like all the other places in the video, it's a pretty popular day and weekend trip spot, and that's why we went there. We went there for a weekend a couple years ago.
Feels like a very American. It's probably all of the flags and just the look of the buildings as well. I mean, yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of like the West Coast.
There's an old hotel there called the Martha Washington Inn that was originally a women's college built in 1832. And along the main historic street are some nice locally owned shops and restaurants, cafes, and art galleries. Also located downtown.
Is this on the West Coast? Virginia? No, it's not.
Town is the historic Barter Theater, which is the official state theater of Virginia. And when we were there a couple of years ago, we saw Murder on the Orient Express live right there. Southwest Virginia is the poorest part of the state and one of the poorest parts of the country, but Abingdon is relatively wealthy compared to the surrounding area. And you can even find a little bit of bouginess in Abingdon. It's also a spot I would recommend if you're interested in seeing some Appalachian fall foliage. It's located halfway-ish between Shenandoah National Park in Virginia and Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee and North Carolina. Similar beautiful scenery, the trees turn the same colors but significantly fewer crowds. Going back to the West Coast, my personal favorite small town, that's Morro Bay, California. It's located on the Central Coast, not in one of the large metro areas. And because of that, it's not overrun with tourists. It's pretty far south of San Francisco Bay Area, so folks from there don't go there. It's pretty far north of the LA area. People from there don't go there. And you can go even in the middle of the high season, and it isn't really crowded. It's mostly people from other parts of Central California that go there. And like other West Coast towns, it's pretty chilly even in the summer. It's not a beach escape, but it is a great town to
I would have thought 100% it'd be a beach escape because it's right on the coast, right on the edge.
walk around right there along the Embarcadero, some good seafood restaurants, some interesting shops. You have many sport fishing trips take off from there. You can see many sea otters and other mammals in the water right there. And the big rock out there is called Morro Rock. It's a volcanic neck, which is an erosionary remnant of a volcano. The waterfront there is really nice. The main street a few blocks inland is also really nice. And the town is actually kind of a middle-class town, so regular folks in regular type homes can live there. But they're really, really expensive houses now. A lot of the folks that live there bought their home 15, 20, or many more years ago than that when it was cheap. But now they're kind of NIMBY-ish, not much growth there. The population is 10,000 now. It's been the same population since 1980.
Wow.
But nonetheless,
I'm surprised that they haven't built a lot of homes there. California, from what I've heard, property in most of California is really expensive. Especially if there's space there, why not build more homes?
It's a really nice town, so I can imagine if you live there why you might be NIMBY. Morro Bay, California, my personal favorite small town in the country. Heading back to the East Coast, I'm now going to Cape May, New Jersey. Of all the ones I'll mention, this is the one that might become the most overrun with tourists in the high season. It's a pretty popular day and weekend spot for folks in New Jersey and the New York area. The population of the town of Cape May is 2,700, but just inland from that is the town of Cape May Courthouse with 5,500. The town was founded in 1690, and it's actually the oldest tourist resort town in the U.S.
Wow,
Sometime in the early
oldest.
1800s, it became a pretty popular beach destination for people from New Jersey and New York. And
look at these buildings, man. It looks like almost like out of a fairy tale. The way these these things are like drooping from the roof. I don't even know what you'd call these things.
Been a tourist economy there for over 200 years. But even though there is a nice beach there on Cape May, most of the other spots around there are kind of swampy. But again, broken record here. It's a nice small town with a nice downtown, some nice art and music scenes. There's a big jazz festival there. And like just about everywhere else in the Northeast, there's a bunch of ice cream shops there, and they're all crowded. The focal point of downtown is the Washington Street pedestrian mall, no vehicles allowed on it. And there are many beautiful historic inns and bed and breakfasts to stay in. So when most folks think of New Jersey, they think of the big cities and suburbs, but at the far south end of the state is a nice small town, Cape May. And the last one that I'm going to mention is quite a bit different from the other ones. I'm going over to Germany for this one, in the small town of Bad Tolz. This is located in Bavaria in the far south end of Germany, not too far from the Austria border. And there are about 19,000 people that live in this town. And I wanted to mention this one for more personal reasons. My wife and I got a chance to visit here in summer 2024. This is the town that her father spent his formative years in. He was born around this town, and this was basically his home village. You're starting to get up into the mountains here. The elevation is 2,160 feet. And this is a very old town. It was founded in 1331. And the main street right downtown is a medieval pedestrian street. And just like the small towns in the U.S., it has some really cool locally owned shops, restaurants, cafes. And it's a very popular spot for many tourists from other parts of Germany.
Like 1300s. Could you imagine what life must have been like? I can't even think about it. Like what they wore, what they did on a daily basis. Just completely different, completely.
The original name of the town was simply Tolz, but they added Bad to it in 1899. Bad is the German word for spa, and there are many iodine-rich hot springs in the area. And as a result, it became a bit of a resort town, many folks going to sit in the hot springs at spas. So it was really cool for me to see a small German town and compared to some of the small towns in the U.S. or other places I've been. Really nice town. If you happen to be in Munich, do take the short train ride down to Bad Tolz. Really cool small town. So that was my look at a handful of cute small towns.
Man, like, part of me, I think, you know, maybe when I'm like older, like just retire in a small town. Because I've been a city dweller like all my life, you know, and to be fair, living in a city has its advantages. You can find pretty much anything you need. Like there's always things to do, etc., etc. But like the life of a small town person where you pretty much know everybody on your street, like everybody kind of looks out for each other, or at least that's how I imagine people live in a small town. You know, it does have its attractiveness as well. Like this, that calmness, that peace and quiet, it is alluring. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.